with the social stuff, and especially the big, really big fuzzy issues that there's not necessarily an answer for, we tend to talk a lot and have a lot of conversations, like, again, on Twitter and on blog posts and stuff like that. But one thing that's really great that I've just observed is that personal face-to-face meetings at DrupalCons in particular, also camps, leads to a lot of resolution in our community. We tend to get into huge arguments, and like some really nasty stuff can happen during the year. And then we all get to DrupalCon and we all see each other and we're like, you're human. Whoa. And you have context for where that entire argument came from. And so we tend to do like a lot of hugging and shaking of hands and agreeing to disagree at DrupalCons, which I think is awesome. Like, I think that's great that we actually have that kind of interaction available to us to work through issues, because at the end of the day, like, sitting down and just talking with other people one-on-one is a great way of resolving things without having to have, some greater authority structure like Dries coming in and saying, now you guys play nice, otherwise you're going to go to your room for 20 minutes, like that kind of a thing. We don't tend to do that a lot in the community. We tend to just talk it out. And it's kind of surprising to me, especially at the size of community we are, that we can have conversations like this and that we do work as much stuff out as we do. Like, on paper, it looks like it's just like a disaster. Like it looks like it's just designed to just explode all the time. But we really, I think, do quite a good job of it. But I do think that it would be interesting or cool to think about other ways of addressing the fact that there are social conflicts, there always will be, and sort of, other ways that we can allow for expression of those in a way that the entire community can be aware of the conflict and where people are coming from, and then building in ways for people to communicate so we can get to resolution. So those are sort of my obviously there's a million things about community that you can study and look at, but these are these three main points, identity, politics and authority, and conflict, are things that I think are crucial. And I think that the Drupal community is a really interesting case study of those 3 points in terms of how things are done. And I think that we can, as a community, have some really interesting conversations around those areas that would just, other than being just academically interesting to me, would also be really beneficial to the community in terms of us getting bigger and scaling and moving forward. So all that said, so here's like just taking a little bit of a pulse on things here. I think these sorts of things are the kinds of things that we do really well as a community. And when you look at, research, and these are things that work in communities and these are things that don't, like, these are things that we've worked out just building our community and doing stuff. And I think that there is good transparency. I don't think any large community has 100% transparency. That's pretty hard, but I think overall we try really hard with that. And when we feel like people aren't being transparent, who are in roles of authority in one form or another, it tends to get called out pretty quickly. And instead of people just being an armadillo and sort of wrapping up, I think that organizations like the Drupal Association, that's probably one of the big classic ones where people are like, we don't know what you're doing and you have all of our money. Like, what are you people doing day in and day out? They have tried, they're working. I used to be on the association and I'm not any longer. And of course it's much easier said than done. But I do think that the intent there is there. And it's not the kind of thing where people are trying to hide things from the community. And it's the same thing with like our core group of you have our core committers. Question?
No, the association published a report of what they did and what they spent on. It's about
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, and that's the thing, is the association really is doing that, and they've been like as time has gone on, they've been just sort of trying to figure out how they can communicate better with our community. And I think that that's a great thing about our community. And I think that people keep calling that out and keep making that sort of a standard that we want our community to live by. So I think we're doing that really well. Openness to dissent, I think, is really important. Like, we do have a lot of conflict in our community. And I think that we are open to dissenting voices. And dissent is not necessarily conflict even, right? Like, just because someone doesn't agree doesn't necessarily mean that has to become a conflict. It's just like, we have this, I disagree with you, but we're still all going to move towards this goal, even if I disagree. I mean, we can agree to disagree in our community. Sometimes it's conflicty, but there are a lot of things that happen, typically in issue queues all the time. People just agree to disagree. And like, this is, okay, well, I see where that's, okay, and we have to compromise somewhere, so let's just go this road and make it happen. But people generally can disagree in our community. At least I've found that myself personally. I think that having the code of conduct, having a constitution, as it's sometimes referred to, where a community sort of states kind of where they are, where they're going, how they, like just sort of setting some basic ground rules for the community. I think that was a good move, even though I personally at the time didn't agree with it. Because I was like, no, man, we don't need to write stuff down. Like, we're humans. Like, just be nice. And there was a lot of argument around that. But at the scale that we're getting in our community, like I said, because part of my thing was like, oh, come on, people know how to be decent and not be like that guy, right? We know these things, like, just get on with it. But like I said earlier, I think having that kind of thing actually just sort of written down somewhere is very useful in terms of conflict resolution and conflict processing. So it's not so much, again, of like, when you enter the community, like, these are the rules that you must abide by. It's more like, once you're a part of the community, these are the rules that we're going to use to help us keep moving forward and not get stuck. So it's more of like greasing the rails kind of